What's the worst thing someone has ever said to you on a date? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe, and I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like and comment something related to the topic. Let's begin. Story 1. I was lying in bed one night with my boyfriend at the time. The lights were off, and we weren't talking, just lying there quietly, both lost in our own thoughts. Then, out of nowhere, he rolled over and hugged me really tightly. I hugged him back, thinking it was just a sweet, random moment. But then this feeling hit me. If I hadn't already been lying down, it probably would have knocked me over. It was an overwhelming wave of dread, deep, heavy, almost suffocating. I've had panic attacks before, but this wasn't that. This was something else entirely. It felt external, like it wasn't coming from me. I squeezed him tighter, terrified, and I remember realizing that even though he's always naturally warm, I felt cold in his arms. Not just chilly, ice cold. And that's when I felt it, this awful, evil presence in the corner of my room. I couldn't see anything, but it was like when you just know someone's standing behind you. The air felt thick and wrong, and I swear it felt like something was watching us. Finally, I managed to whisper, "Jay, do you feel that?" And he said, "Yeah, the cold, the feeling." It lasted maybe 30 seconds, a minute at most, but it felt like forever. Jay suddenly grabbed his phone and said he was going to call his friend Matt, a guy who was studying to be a youth pastor. I got up, turned the lights on, and sat back down beside him while he put Matt on speakerphone. Jay explained what was happening, and Matt immediately started praying for us over the phone. We both closed our eyes, listening quietly, praying along in our heads. As he prayed, the heaviness in the room began to lift. The air didn't feel cold anymore. It was like whatever had been there was gone. When Matt finished praying, he asked if we were okay, and we started to calm down, chatting a bit just to shake it off. Then, out of nowhere, Matt asked, "Hey, were you two talking while I was praying?" We both said no. We hadn't said a single word. Matt went quiet for a second and then said, "Because while I was praying, I heard a deep, gravelly voice say, 'Stop.' And when I heard it, I got this horrible, dark feeling, like something didn't want me to finish the prayer." That's when we both completely lost it. Jay hung up, grabbed his stuff, and left immediately. He was too freaked out to stay. I was mad he left me there alone, but honestly, I couldn't blame him. I went to my dad's room, shaking, and told him I thought something evil had been in my room. He was half asleep and just mumbled, "If there's something in there, I got a gun. I'll shoot it." "Thanks, Dad." Real comforting. The feeling never came back after that night. The room felt normal again, and life just went on. But I still think about it sometimes. If it really was a demon, what was it doing there? What did it want? Why just that one night? I'll probably never know. Story 2. Back in high school, I was part of our school's cheer squad. Every summer before the new school year started, we'd go to cheer camp, a few days at a nearby university where we'd learn new routines, stunts, and compete with other teams. Now, I was not your typical cheerleader. I liked my space. While the others were always hanging out, blasting music, and being loud, I preferred peace and quiet. I'd usually stay in my dorm room reading or listening to music on my little boombox. I shared the room with 2 other girls, but during downtime, they were always across the hall with everyone else. That meant I usually had the room to myself, which, that night, turned out to be a bad thing. It was our last night there. I was lying on my stomach, facing away from the dorm door, just zoning out and listening to music when I heard a voice, a female whisper, right behind me. "Turn around." I froze for a second, then slowly turned my head. Nobody was there. I shook it off, thinking maybe I imagined it or the sound had carried from the hallway. I went back to what I was doing. Then, again, a whisper, clearer this time. "Turn around." Okay, weird. I got up, opened the door, and peeked out into the hall. Empty. The girls across the hall always had their door open when they were hanging out, but now it was shut and completely silent. I figured maybe someone was pranking me, so I went back inside. I hadn't even sat down when I heard it again. "Turn around." And this time, there were 2 sharp taps on my right shoulder. I jumped up so fast I almost fell over. There was no one there. I checked under the beds, behind the door, even the shared closet that connected to our coach's room on the other side. Nothing. Nobody. At that point, I was done. I grabbed my stuff and walked straight across the hall to the other girls' room. They were all laughing and singing like normal, so I tried to play it cool, But when I told my friend what happened, she looked way too excited. She was really into ghost stuff. She wanted me to tell everyone, but I decided not to. Later that night, our coach and one of her friends gathered everyone around to tell ghost stories before bed. The last story they told hit a little too close to home. They said that the white gazebo out front, the one right outside my dorm window, had been built years ago by a wealthy couple who donated a ton of money to the school for their daughter's wedding. But the daughter found out her fiancé was cheating on her shortly before the ceremony, and she hung herself from that very gazebo. I remember going completely still. That gazebo was the first thing I'd noticed when I moved into my room, directly outside the window, lit up by a small floodlight at night. I told my friend to go ahead and tell my story. When she did, the smiles and laughter vanished from our coach and her friends' faces. They just looked at each other in silence. Nobody slept in my dorm room that night. Story 3. I went on a date with a woman who worked in early childhood education. I think specifically with autistic kids. I had recently watched this fascinating documentary about how a child's brain develops, and I thought it might be something she'd find interesting. The part that really stuck with me was how the human brain doesn't fully develop the ability to empathize until around age 6 or 7, meaning that in just a few short years, we go from being these little instinct-driven creatures to actual people capable of cooperation, morality, and complex social behavior. So, sitting there, full of excitement to share this interesting bit of science with someone who might actually appreciate it, I decided to bring it up. Only, I completely butchered my point. In my eagerness, I said, "It's like they're not even people at that age." The words were barely out of my mouth before I realized how terrible that sounded, especially to someone who literally works with children. She went quiet, really quiet. Then, after a moment, she looked at her phone and said something had come up and she had to leave early. I never found out what it was. Story 4. He took me to a sports bar that was doing half-price wine bottles because, according to him, I like sports and wine, and it just so happened to be the first round of the NHL playoffs. At first, it sounded like a fun, casual idea. But then, for nearly 2 straight hours, he explained, in full seriousness, how professional hockey was scripted. Like, WW-level scripted. I wish I were joking. He paid for some food, and I paid for the wine. We'd agreed on that ahead of time, and I was totally fine with it. But then, when we were done eating, he asked if he could take my leftovers home. Mind you, it was basically a few fries and the end of a tortilla for my Caesar wrap that didn't even have any filling in it. He said he needed it for an experiment he was working on with his roommate. I didn't even ask what that meant. When the date was finally over and we were walking out, he asked if I wanted to drive 45 minutes to his place. At around 10 p.m., not for sex, he clarified, but because I live alone and there's supposed to be a thunderstorm. I politely said no and told him I didn't really feel a connection. That's when he said, completely straight-faced, "Oh, that makes sense. You're not very intelligent. And I'm looking for a dumb girl, but not you dumb." I was so stunned, I didn't even know how to respond. This from the same guy who had just told me he didn't finish high school and couldn't figure out what half-price wine meant because the menu only listed the regular price at $39. Truly one of the most confusing dates of my life. Story 5. I cooked dinner, spaghetti carbonara, for a woman I'd just started seeing. I figured it'd be a nice, simple date night at home. While we ate, she spent most of the meal on the phone with a friend, loudly talking about an upcoming court date. Not exactly dinner conversation material, but I tried to stay polite and let her finish. After dinner, she opened a bottle of vodka. I assumed she'd have a drink or two, but she ended up downing the entire bottle in about 40 minutes. She passed out not long after, so I carried her to the bedroom, put her in bed, set a glass of water on the nightstand, and let her sleep it off. At that point, my night was basically over, so I called up a friend, went out partying for a few hours, and got back around 5 in the morning. When I walked in, she woke up and asked where I'd been. I told her I'd been in the room next door, just to avoid drama. Then she immediately asked if we could start drinking again. I said no, that she'd already had more than enough. That turned into a 30-minute argument, where she insisted she'd seen a bottle of whiskey downstairs and couldn't understand why I wouldn't let her have some. Eventually, I just gave up and went to bed. The next morning, I drove her home. On the way, she told me I was the nicest guy she'd ever met, and that she wanted to see me again. As soon as I dropped her off, I blocked her on everything and went back to living my life. Story 6. Tuck your laces into your shoes and don't touch anything. That was the very first thing she said to me when we got back to her place after dinner. I was wearing boots, so I took them off and neatly set them by the door. She'd already slipped off her shoes and was sitting on the couch, waiting for me. I was thinking, all right, this is going well. I was grinning like an idiot, certain the night was about to take a fun turn. Then she frowned. Stop. Tuck your laces into your shoes. I laughed, thinking she was joking, trying to be cute or funny. She wasn't. Her expression didn't change at all. Oh, okay, I said, awkwardly bending down to tuck the laces inside my boots. Do you, have a cat or something? No, that was it. Just no. I chuckled nervously, still trying to play it cool, but inside I already knew this night was going downhill fast. I sat on the couch, pretending to relax while she put on a VHS copy of The Notebook. On a tube TV from 2001. The tracking lines were so bad, I could barely see the screen. I sat there for an hour, nodding along, all while plotting my escape. Eventually, I got up and said I needed to use the bathroom. Finally, a chance to make a clean exit afterward. I walked down the hall, shut the door, and started to pee. Then came a knock. Yeah, I said, thinking she just needed to use the bathroom too. From the other side of the door, I heard her say, in the calmest, most serious voice imaginable, "Don't touch anything in there. You may, however, use the hand soap. Do not use the towel, and do not use the toilet paper." I froze midstream, staring at my reflection in the mirror with the most bewildered look on my face. That's when it hit me. She wasn't quirky. She wasn't shy. She was absolutely nuts. And that was just the beginning. Story 7. I'd been seeing this girl for a few weeks. Things were still new, but they seemed to be going well. We'd hooked up once, gone on a few nice dates, and texted pretty often. Nothing serious yet, but definitely headed that way. At the time, I was enrolled in a college program that was mostly remote, except for one mandatory in-person week each semester. She happened to live just a short drive from the campus, so I asked if I could crash at her place for a couple of nights to save on hotel costs. She said sure, no problem. When I got there, she had just adopted a new dog. Cute little thing, full of energy, tail wagging nonstop. She spent the entire evening gushing over him, showing me all his toys, his bed, even the treats she'd bought. It was adorable, honestly. But when it came time for bed, she suddenly went cold. No cuddling, no flirting, nothing. It felt off. I didn't push it, though, figured she was tired or adjusting to having a puppy around. The second night was the same. She spent the whole evening with the dog, barely acknowledged me, then went to bed early. The next morning, we went for a walk with the dog, or rather, she walked the dog and I followed along awkwardly. She kept talking about how happy she was, how complete she felt now that she had him. Then, out of nowhere, she turned to me, smiled, and said, "Yeah, I think I just wanted a dog. I've replaced you with my dog." I didn't even know what to say. I finished the walk, packed my stuff, and left. Never heard from her again. Story 8. I matched with this woman on Hinge who, funny enough, runs a local meetup group I'd been planning to attend. I didn't recognize her from the events page when we matched, but she mentioned she recognized me right away. We chatted online for a bit, easy conversation, normal vibes, and eventually made plans to grab a drink. She showed up, and immediately, something felt off. For the next 30 minutes, she didn't smile. Not once. Not when we greeted each other. Not when I cracked jokes. Not even when I tried to steer the conversation toward things she said she loved, her hobbies, her work, that meetup group, anything. She just sat there, expressionless, answering in short sentences. I kept trying, thinking maybe she was nervous or shy, but it got so awkward that after 10 minutes, I had to excuse myself and go to the bathroom, mostly just to take a breath and figure out if I was somehow imagining how strange it all felt. When I came back, nothing had changed. We sat through another painfully quiet 15 minutes before she finally said she had to go. I told her it was nice meeting her and watched her walk out, feeling the biggest wave of relief I've ever felt on a date. Later that night, I looked back at her Hinge profile, all big smiles and fun captions. One of her prompts even said she felt most alive when laughing with friends until her sides hurt. The contrast between her profile and the person I'd just sat across from was honestly jarring. Since I still wanted to attend that meetup, I couldn't just ghost her. I sent a polite text thanking her for coming out and saying I didn't really feel a connection, but hoped to see her around at future events. She texted back almost immediately, friendly, warm, even a bit chatty. It was the most emotion I'd seen from her the entire time we'd been face to face. I don't usually get thrown by awkward first dates, but this one stuck with me. I'm still wildly curious what she's like in a group setting, because the woman from that date and the one from her profile honestly felt like two completely different people. Story 9. Met this guy on Tinder. Yeah, that was mistake number 1. He offered to take me out, and I figured sure, why not? We were both in college, so I wasn't expecting anything fancy. He ended up taking me to Wendy's. Not ideal, but whatever. I can roll with that. Except, instead of going inside, he went through the drive-thru, ordered food for himself, then parked in a lot so we could eat in the car. I figured maybe he just liked casual dates, but then he offered me 3 fries, literally 3, and afterward asked me to Venmo him for them. That was the tone setter for the night. While we ate, he started talking about his celebrity crushes. Harmless enough, until he said, completely straight-faced, it'd be easy to be in a grocery line with you because you're a very average-looking woman. You wouldn't make me feel insecure being with you. But being in line with someone like Addison Rae would be hard because she's way out of my league, and no one would believe we're actually together. I just sat there like, did this guy really just say that out loud? And it didn't stop there. He went on to mention that he hadn't even meant to swipe right on me, that he was just swiping right on everyone to get matches, and I just happened to be one of them. At that point, I finished my food, made polite small talk, and got out of there as fast as I could. Later, when I told him I didn't want to see him again, he texted me saying he was going to end all because I'd rejected him. So yeah, worst date of my life, start to finish. Story 10. 2 stories for me, both absolute disasters. First one, it wasn't even a date, just a casual hookup. I met a guy online, we chatted for a bit, had good chemistry, and agreed to meet up. He sent me his address. I drove over, and when I knocked, he opened the front door, looked me up and down, and said one single word. No. Then he slammed the door and turned off the porch light. That was it. Just no. I sat there in my car for a solid minute trying to process what had just happened before driving home in silence, questioning all of my life choices. Second one. This one was an actual date, with a guy who had been pursuing me for months. He'd finally convinced me to go out with him, and honestly, the evening was going well. We were having dinner, laughing, good conversation, all the usual first date stuff. At one point, I excused myself to go to the restroom. When I came back, the waiter dropped off the check. I handed over my card, and while I waited for him to return with the receipt, my date excused himself to his restroom break. When the waiter came back, he looked a little awkward. He handed me my card and then said, "I'm sorry to ask this, but are you two on a date?" I said, "Yeah, we are." "What?" The waiter handed me a folded napkin and said, "Your date gave me this while you were gone." I opened it, and there it was, my date's full name, phone number, and a message that said, "Call me when you get off tonight." He was literally trying to hook up with our waiter while on our date. I didn't say a word when he came back. I finished dinner, drove him home, and as soon as he got out of the car, I blocked his number and never spoke to him again. Story 11. Here's a wild one. I've been seeing this woman casually for a few weeks. Things are going fine. We got along well. There was chemistry, but I had a feeling I might have been the rebound guy after her last relationship. Still, we made plans to meet up at a bar near my place. The morning of, she texted saying she wanted to hang out with her girlfriends instead, at the same bar. She said I could stop by if I wanted, but she'd be focused on catching up with them. Honestly, I appreciated how direct she was. I told her that was fine and that I'd just head home after work, but if she ended up wanting me there, to let me know. Later that evening, as I was leaving work, she texted again. She was already at the bar. Her friends hadn't arrived yet, and she said there was a guy there making her uncomfortable. She explained she'd run into him a few times before. Some creep who used to hit on her even when she had a boyfriend. Apparently, he'd always make excuses like, "Just come over for one drink, just a minute, I gotta let my dog out anyway." The last time she'd seen him, he got pushy and she'd told him off. So, she asked if I could come by, just to make her feel safer until her friends showed. I said of course. When I got there, I ordered a couple of micheladas and sat with her. She seemed relieved I'd shown up and said the guy had left shortly before I arrived. We started venting about our days, and things were actually going well. Easy conversation, good energy. Her friends were still running late, but she didn't seem to mind. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone pacing near the back of the bar, texting like crazy. It took a second for it to click, but when it did, my stomach dropped. It was my ex's new boyfriend. To make things worse, the guy's a coke dealer and an all-around sketchy human being. He and I had history, bad history. When my ex started dating him, I couldn't stay friends with her anymore because she'd made it clear I wasn't allowed anywhere he might be. I leaned over and said to my date, half joking, wow, one night, now there's someone here that I'm uncomfortable with. I pointed him out and she froze. That's the same guy, she said. I blinked. Wait, what? Yeah, she said quietly. That's the guy who's been bothering me. My brain scrambled to process it. My ex's new boyfriend was the same creep who'd been harassing the woman I was dating now. It made sense, but it was so surreal. I told her we could talk to the door guy, or maybe head somewhere else, have her friends meet us at another bar, anything to get away from him. But she wasn't really responding. She just kept staring down at her phone. I noticed the pink reflection from the Lyft app in her eyes. After a long pause, she finally said, without looking up, you know, the fact that you have anything to do with this guy, I know you don't like him either, but I'm just really turned off right now. I'm done for the night. I offered to walk her out, and we passed right by him on the way to her car. She got in without another word. I never heard from her again. The creepy part? I'd known that guy for years, back when I was dating my ex. He used to use that same line about letting the dog out to lure women back to his place. But here's the thing, he's never owned a dog. So yeah, not only was that one of the strangest, most disappointing dates I've ever been on, but also made me worry all over again about my ex and everything I try to move past. C'est la vie, I guess. Story 12. It wasn't exactly a date, more like a low-key beer and brats get-together in the Midwest. My brother had invited a few friends, and one of them was a woman he hadn't seen since high school. She showed up with her girlfriend, and we figured it'd just be another casual evening of drinks, food, and catching up. Within minutes of arriving, though, she started making her way around the party, introducing herself by grabbing every guy there right in the crotch. I wish I were exaggerating. She just walked up, one after another, like she was shaking hands, except definitely not hands. After making her rounds, and apparently deciding no one met her standards, she and her girlfriend left as quickly as they'd arrived. Everyone was too stunned to react in the moment. It was one of those surreal situations where you're all looking at each other like, did that really just happen? By the time anyone thought to call her out or say something, she was already gone, out the door and on the road. The wild part is that she completely got away with it. She was so calm and deliberate that it took everyone a few minutes to even process it. I still joke about it sometimes, that apparently our definitions of a beer and sausage party were very different. And honestly, if a guy had shown up to a chill party and started grabbing everyone's chest or worse, he wouldn't have lasted 5 seconds before getting punched or thrown out. It was one of the most bizarre, uncomfortable things I've ever seen. Equal parts shocking and just absurd. Story 13. Before I even get to what he said, let's start with how the date began. He picked me up, and the moment I saw him, I was surprised to say the least. We were going to a sports bar, so I wasn't dressed fancy or anything, but I still made sure to look nice. Jeans, cute top, makeup done. He, on the other hand, showed up in a tank top, cargo shorts, flip-flops, and a backwards hat. It was giving just rolled out of bed, not first date. I tried to shrug off, but things got worse fast. At the table, I noticed he was constantly looking down at his phone. At first, I thought maybe it was work or a friend checking in, but no, he was actively texting his ex. Not secretly either. He straight up told me he was just making sure she's okay. Apparently, she was about 10 years younger than him. He was around 30, she was barely 20, and they dated long distance. I was so uncomfortable that I just wanted the night to end. When the check came, I didn't even give him a chance to grab it. I paid for both our meals just so I could get out faster. I didn't even let him drive me home. I called an Uber and left. Later that night, We texted about how inappropriate it was for him to be messaging his ex while on a date. He didn't even deny it. He said she was the love of his life, and he couldn't just cut her off. At that point, I was done, but I did tell him he should at least pay me back for dinner since I'd covered everything. He replied, "Okay, I'll come by tomorrow. Don't touch my truck." By the next morning, I was blocked. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, activate the notification bell, and share a similar story or anything you'd like to say in the comments. See you next time.